At my husband's memorial, my stepson whispered to his wife that I was too old to run anything. They poisoned my coffee the next morning, eager to steal the company Edward and I built together. I stayed quiet, pretending confusion. Weeks later in court, I played their own recordings. Guilty on all counts. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I came back from Canada earlier than anyone expected. The flight from Toronto was cold, bitter in the way that sinks into your bones and lingers, no matter how many blankets you pull around yourself. I had been there for Andrew's wedding, my son, my pride, the boy who grew into a man with steady hands and a steady heart. Watching him marry Emily in that small chapel by Lake Ontario was like seeing a promise fulfilled, a reminder that love, real love, still existed in the world. But after 2 days of Canadian winter, I'd had enough. Enough of the wind that stung like needles, enough of shivering until my teeth rattled. So instead of waiting until Sunday as planned, I caught the Friday night red-eye. The taxi left me at my house just after 11, the air here soft and civilized compared to Toronto's cruel frost. The first thing I noticed was the light in my kitchen window. Odd. Daniel usually spent Friday nights at bars, drowning himself in whiskey or beer, depending on his mood. He never had the patience to sit at home. And Vanessa, well, she wasn't the type to waste a weekend indoors either. The glow behind those curtains set my nerves humming. I slipped my key into the lock, pushed the door open as quietly as I could, and froze. Voices drifted down the hallway, sharp enough to slice through the silence. "We'll start tomorrow morning," Vanessa said. Her voice was smooth, careless, as if she were talking about the weather. "That should begin showing symptoms in about a week." My blood chilled. "And then what?" Daniel's voice was tight, like a man trying not to choke. "What if she notices?" "She's already forgetful. It has to be documented, otherwise we can't get guardianship." Guardianship. The word hit me like a stone. Suddenly it all clicked. His sudden interest in my health, his fake concern, his hovering questions. He wasn't worried about me. He was plotting. "What about Andrew?" Daniel asked, lowering his voice. "When he finds out, he's in Canada. By the time he figures out what's happening, it'll be too late. The company will already be ours. All of it, not just a third." There it was, plain and simple. They wanted Carter Construction, the company Edward and I had built from nothing over 30 years of sweat and sacrifice. A company now worth $50 million. I had planned to sell it soon, to split the money fairly between myself, Andrew, and Daniel. But apparently, fairness wasn't in Daniel's vocabulary. I leaned against the wall, steadying myself, listening to every venomous word. "What if she fights us?" Daniel's voice quivered. "She won't," Vanessa said coldly. "By the end of the week, she'll be much more manageable." Manageable. As if I were a pet they needed to train. Something hot and bitter rose in my chest, but I swallowed it down. Rage wouldn't serve me tonight. I had been an actress once. Long ago, before marriage, before children, before construction blueprints and boardroom battles filled my days. I knew how to deliver a performance. And now, standing in my own hallway, I realized it was time to step back onto the stage. If they wanted a fragile, confused old woman, I would give them exactly that. I pushed the front door open again, this time loud enough to echo. "Hello? Anyone home?" Rapid whispers scattered from the kitchen, footsteps shuffled. Vanessa appeared first, her smile stretched so wide it could have cracked her face. "Maggie, we didn't expect you back until Sunday." "Too cold," I said, dragging my suitcase across the hardwood, making the sound last. I glanced toward the kitchen doorway where Daniel stood stiff, his face pale and guilty. "I thought I'd surprise you." He mumbled something like a greeting, eyes avoiding mine. Vanessa stepped closer, her voice honeyed. "How was the wedding?" "Beautiful. Andrew looked genuinely happy," I said, watching Daniel flinch at his brother's name. "It's amazing, isn't it, when someone finds a partner who actually loves them." Daniel's lips twitched. He looked like a bit caught stealing cookies, and for a moment I almost pitied him. "Almost." "That's wonderful," Vanessa chimed. "We've been taking care of everything here. You must be exhausted." "I am," I admitted, though not for the reasons they thought. Wait, she said, darting back into the kitchen. She returned with a glass of warm milk, cinnamon sprinkled prettily on top. I made this for you. It'll help you sleep. I accepted it with both hands, smiling as if touched by her kindness. The glass was warm, the milk frothy, the cinnamon fragrant. But beneath it, faint and unmistakable, was the bitter sting of chemicals. I lifted it to my lips, let the liquid brush my mouth, and tasted poison. Not metaphorical poison. Real. My tongue tingled, my lips numbed. They hadn't even bothered to mask it well. Thank you, dear, I said sweetly, lowering the glass. But I think I'm too wired to sleep just yet. Maybe I'll save this for later. Her smile faltered just for an instant. Daniel shifted uneasily, his hands jammed in his pockets. I set the glass down on the hall table and started up the stairs. Their eyes followed me, heavy, disappointed, desperate. For 27 years, I'd raised that boy. Fed him, clothed him, defended him, and this was how he repaid me. By planning to drug me into a stupor and steal the company Edward and I built. Well, if Daniel and Vanessa thought they could outsmart me, they were about to learn how wrong two people could be. They had just declared war on a woman who had been fighting battles since before they were born, and I intended to win. Saturday morning arrived with an ache pressing behind my eyes and a fog clinging stubbornly to my thoughts. I stumbled downstairs, half expecting to find silence, but instead the kitchen greeted me with the too perfect smell of freshly ground coffee. For 40 years, that ritual had been my daily anchor. The hiss of water, the bitter steam, the first sip that sharpened the edges of my mind. I poured a cup, inhaled the familiar comfort, and took a swallow. It tasted normal, smooth, dark, strong. Yet within minutes, something shifted. The edges of the room blurred, colors melting together as though the air itself had thickened. My heartbeat stuttered. My tongue felt clumsy. This wasn't jet lag. It wasn't exhaustion. They had gotten to my coffee. Morning, Mom. Daniel's voice came from behind me. He sounded casual, but when I turned, I saw the thin sheen of sweat on his forehead, the dart of his eyes as he watched me sway. I feel strange, I murmured. Both truth and performance. Probably jet lag, he said quickly, but the flicker of satisfaction in his face betrayed him. He was watching his plan succeed. I forced another sip, pretending I didn't notice the fog rolling in. If I suddenly abandoned my routine, they'd know I was onto them. Better to let them believe I was stumbling exactly where they wanted me. Vanessa drifted into the room, silk robe cinched neatly at her waist, her smile bright as polished glass. Good morning, Maggie. You look refreshed. Refreshed, I echoed, hiding my trembling hands. If refreshed meant dazed and drugged, then perhaps she was right. She busied herself at the counter, humming, the picture of domestic calm. But I knew better. Her every movement was calculated. You know, I said, rising unsteadily from the chair, letting my body sway in a way that was half acting, half chemical reality. I feel a bit lightheaded. Daniel was at my side instantly, his hand firm on my elbow, guiding me as though I were a fragile relic about to shatter. Careful, Mom, let me help you to the couch. I let him. In the living room mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself. My reflection matched the picture they wanted to paint. An older woman, confused, unsteady, no longer capable of steering her own life. A perfect victim. A perfect target. This is so embarrassing, I whispered, lowering myself onto the cushions. I've never felt quite so scattered. It's perfectly normal, Vanessa assured me, her tone dripping with false sympathy. Travel can be exhausting. Just rest here. We'll take care of everything. Take care of everything. My mind twisted the words like a knife. By midday, I was supposed to appear sluggish, incoherent, forgetful. And the truth was, I did feel sluggish. I did forget. The drugs swirling in my bloodstream were powerful, stronger than I had anticipated. Pretending was one thing. Fighting against chemical fog was another. So I leaned into the role, mixing genuine confusion with practiced pauses. I called Vanessa by my neighbor's name 3 times. I fumbled the television remote and asked Daniel to show me how it worked. I sprinkled salt into my orange juice instead of sugar, wrinkling my brow as if I couldn't quite place what was wrong. Their eyes lit with quiet triumph each time. They were buying every second, and I was taking careful notes, storing away every look, every word, every slip of arrogance. The next morning, they tried something bolder. I shuffled into the kitchen to find Daniel waiting with a tall glass in hand. The liquid inside was thick, purple, flecked with bits of berry pulp. "Morning, Mom," he said too brightly. "I made you a smoothie, healthy. You didn't eat much yesterday." I stared at the glass. The scent of berries wafted up, mingling with something sharp, chemical, sour beneath the sweetness. Desperation had entered the mix. "That's thoughtful," I said softly, forcing a smile. "But I'm not very hungry." "You should keep your strength up," he pressed. "Just a few sips." His eagerness was a mask too thin to hold. "Maybe later," I said, sinking into the couch, letting my body sag as though burdened by invisible weight. Daniel followed, still clutching the glass, hovering like a vulture over prey too weak to resist. "I'm worried about you," he said, voice trembling with a counterfeit tenderness that made my skin crawl. "You're getting worse. Getting worse." This phrase clung to me, heavy, deliberate. He was rehearsing lines, building the narrative, preparing the script for doctors, lawyers, judges. "I think I should see a doctor," I ventured, testing the waters. "We've already arranged that," Vanessa announced from the doorway, her robe replaced by a tailored dress, her smile sharper now. "Dr. Singh is coming by this afternoon to examine you." The name jolted me. Edward had mentioned him years ago, a doctor who had nearly lost his license for falsifying records. That was who they were bringing into my home. "I'd prefer to see Dr. Williams," I countered, summoning just enough defiance to sound confused, not resistant. "He's been my doctor for 20 years. "Dr. Williams is booked," Daniel said smoothly. "Singh specializes in geriatric issues." Geriatric issues. My stomach twisted. In their mouths, those words meant only one thing: stripping me of control, of autonomy, of everything I had built. The clock ticked louder than usual as the morning dragged on. I kept my performance steady, just lucid enough to converse, just muddled enough to worry them. All the while, I fought through the one and sharpened my resolve. They thought they had me cornered. They thought their poison and their lies would weaken me into submission. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't just fighting for my company. I was fighting for my mind, my freedom, my very life. And if Daniel and Vanessa believed I would surrender quietly, they were about to learn how dangerous an old actress could be when forced back onto the stage. The first thing I saw that Sunday morning was my own reflection staring back at me, pale and fragile in the hallway mirror. My lips parted, my eyes vacant, the image of a woman slipping into forgetfulness. I held that look, memorizing it, because this was the mask I would wear from now on. If Danielle and Vanessa wanted an incompetent old woman, then I would give them a masterpiece. The fog from their poison still lingered in my blood, but my mind was clear enough to shape it into a weapon. Acting was second nature to me. I had once thrived on scripts, stage lights, and audiences who leaned forward, breathless. This would be no different. My stepson and his scheming wife would become my unwitting audience, and I would deliver the performance of a lifetime. Downstairs, Daniel hovered near the kitchen, his hands restless, his eyes shadowed with anticipation. Vanessa breezed in, crisp blouse, hair brushed, smooth, her face glowing with false warmth. "Morning, Maggie. Did you sleep well?" "Sleep?" I asked, letting my voice trail, my gaze wander as though I had forgotten the question before I finished it. "Oh, I don't quite remember." Her smile widened, triumphant. Daniel's posture eased. "Perfect." I let them see me struggle with small things, placing the sugar jar in the refrigerator, misplacing the newspaper I had just unfolded, asking Vanessa twice what day it was. Each time I noted their glances, the subtle nods, the silent confirmation that their plan was working. But the truth was, I had never been sharper. Around noon, the doorbell rang. A thin man in a rumpled suit stepped inside, clutching a black bag that looked more like a prop than real medical equipment. Dr. Singh. His handshake was clammy, his smile too rehearsed. "Mrs. Carter," he said, bowing his head slightly, "I'm here to perform a routine evaluation." Routine, that word alone nearly made me laugh. There was nothing routine about a doctor summoned by conspirators, eager to sign away a life's worth of independence. Daniel and Vanessa flanked me like stage parents at an audition. Dr. Singh asked simple questions. What year was it? Who was president? Could I count backward from 100? I answered every one correctly, but slowly, deliberately hesitant, letting my eyes flicker with confusion at just the right moments. She seems inconsistent, Dr. Singh murmured, scribbling notes. Inconsistent, exactly what they wanted. When he produced papers, my heart thudded once, hard. These weren't medical forms. They screamed of legal traps, conservatorship, power of attorney, phrases highlighted like neon. I can't read these, I whispered, letting my hand tremble as I pushed them back. That's perfectly normal, Daniel assured me, his voice dripping with false concern. Just sign at the bottom. We'll take care of everything. Vanessa added, it's for your own good, Maggie. Trust us. Trust them? The same people who had been lacing my coffee and milk with sedatives? I forced my lips into a wavering smile. I don't think I should sign anything right now. Disappointment darkened Daniel's face. Vanessa's hand twitched, nails pressing into her palm. Dr. Singh coughed nervously, shuffling his papers back into the bag. The scene ended with me sinking into the sofa, whispering, I'm scared. The truth bled into that confession. For the first time, fear wasn't part of the act. It was real. That night, after they tucked me into bed like a child, I made my first call. Charles, my lawyer, answered with steady calm. Maggie, what can I do for you? I need you to document my mental competence, I whispered. And if anything happens to me in the next few weeks, I want it known. It was not an accident. He grew quiet, then promised, I'll handle it. The second call was harder. Andrew answered, his voice bright and concerned. Mom, you sound off. Are you okay? I told him the truth, every detail. The poisoning, the guardianship plan, the doctor. He hesitated. Mom, are you sure? Maybe you misheard. My heart sank. Even my own son thought I was paranoid. Never mind, I said quickly, covering my tremor with false calm. Forget I called. But as I hung up, I swore to myself I would not forget. I would not surrender. Because if Daniel and Vanessa thought they had me cornered, they had no idea what I was capable of. This was only Act 1, and I was just getting started. So stay with me, because what comes next will test every ounce of strength I have, and you won't want to miss the moment the stage lights turn back on me. The following morning stretched on like a taut wire, humming with tension. I moved slowly through my routine, careful to appear distracted, forgetful, pliable. Every stumble, every confused glance, every misplaced object was part of the act. But beneath the mask, my mind was sharp, every sense alive, every thought deliberate. Dr. Singh returned just after lunch. His arrival was announced by the low growl of a car engine in the driveway, then the sharp rap of knuckles against the door. Daniel opened it eagerly, like a boy greeting a savior. Vanessa trailed behind him, smoothing her skirt, lips painted with determination. Mrs. Carter, Dr. Singh said as he entered, adjusting his tie. His suit sagged at the shoulders, his briefcase scuffed. He looked more like a tired salesman than a doctor, but his eyes gave him away, calculating, uneasy, aware of the lies he carried in his bag. He settled in the armchair across from me, flipping open a folder filled with neatly stacked pages. We'll just run through a few questions again to establish a baseline. The performance resumed. I hesitated before answering, feigned uncertainty at simple arithmetic, blinked in confusion when he asked the year. The trick was balance. Too sharp, and they'd increase the dosage. Too far gone, and they'd panic, pushing me into a facility before I could prepare. I walked the narrow edge between competence and collapse, and I walked it well. Daniel and Vanessa hovered nearby, watching every flicker of expression. I felt their anticipation in the air, thick as smoke. When the questions ended, Dr. Singh withdrew a sheaf of documents, sliding them across the coffee table with deliberate care. These are standard medical forms, he said, his tone falsely reassuring. I leaned forward, squinting as though the words swam on the page. And even with my blurred vision from their drugs, certain terms screamed at me in bold print. Power of attorney, conservatorship, commitment, order. My pulse kicked hard against my ribs. I can't read these, I murmured, letting my hands shake as I pushed them back toward him. That's perfectly normal, Daniel said quickly, his voice layered with honeyed deceit. That's why we're here. Just sign at the bottom of each page. Yes, Vanessa added, her smile stretched so thin it was nearly transparent. This will make sure you're safe, Maggie. We'll handle everything. I forced my lips into a wavering curve. I don't think I should sign anything right now. My head feels fuzzy, which is why it's so important, Dr. Singh urged, sweat glistening along his hairline. These forms guarantee you'll get proper care. Care. The word twisted bitter on my tongue. Their idea of care was to lock me away, strip me of my freedom, and sell my life's work from under me. I'm scared, I whispered, letting tears prick my eyes. This time it wasn't entirely an act. The situation was real, and the fear, sharp as broken glass, bled through despite my control. Daniel squeezed my hand, his touch clammy. Don't worry, Mom, we'll take care of everything. That phrase again, it lodged deep, a warning bell clanging in my chest. When Dr. Singh finally packed his bag, disappointment lingered in the air, like smoke after a fire. No signature today, no prize claimed. But I knew they wouldn't stop. The trap was already in motion. That night I sat alone in my study. Shadows stretched long across the floor, the scent of the garden roses Edward and I had planted years ago, drifting faintly through the open window. His voice echoed in memory. Mark my words, Maggie. Daniel's weakness and entitlement are dangerous. Be careful. For years I defended Daniel. For years I excused his failures, told myself love and patience would shape him into something decent. And now here I was staring at the evidence of his betrayal, wishing I had listened to Edward sooner. I reached for the phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed. Charles, I whispered when my lawyer answered, I need you to document my mental competence immediately. And listen carefully. If anything happens to me, if anyone claims I'm confused or incompetent, don't believe it. Don't let them act without my recorded consent. There was silence. Then his steady reply. I understand. I'll handle it. The second call was harder. Andrew picked up on the second ring, his voice warm with concern. Mom, are you all right? You sound tired. I need you to listen, I said, forcing my words through the weight of exhaustion. Daniel and Vanessa are trying to drug me. They want me declared incompetent so they can take the company. The silence on the line was long and heavy. Mom, that sounds... He faltered, his doubt cutting deeper than the poison in my veins. Are you sure? Maybe you misheard something. Daniel wouldn't... Andrew, I said, my voice breaking. Please, I'm not paranoid. I'm telling you the truth. He sighed, troubled. When did you last see a doctor? My chest tightened. My own son didn't believe me. The weight of it pressed down until I could barely breathe. Never mind, I said quickly, swallowing the ache. I'm just tired. Forget I called. Mom, wait. But I hung up. The silence that followed was suffocating. I sat in the dim glow of the lamp, staring at the papers Dr. Singh had left behind, the words still burning in my mind like a brand. If Andrew couldn't help me, then I would save myself. Because no matter how fogged my thoughts became, no matter how alone I felt, one truth blazed bright and undeniable. I was in a fight for my life, and I had no intention of losing. The dawn crept in with a strange heaviness, as if the air itself carried warning. My body moved slowly, my mind still tangled in the remnants of drug-induced fog, but my resolve had never been sharper. When I stepped into the kitchen, Daniel was waiting with a glass in his hand, a thick purple smoothie that gleamed in the morning light like poison disguised as health. Morning, Mom, he said too brightly, his eyes twitching with forced cheer. I thought you might like something fresh today. Berries, vitamins, all good for you. The smell reached me before the glass did. Sweet fruit, yes, but beneath it lingered a sour chemical note that made my stomach clench. He held it out like an offering, like salvation, but all I saw was desperation. That's thoughtful, I said softly, letting my fingers graze the glass but not take it. But I don't feel very hungry. You should keep your strength up, he urged, pressing it closer. Just a few sips. The eagerness in his voice betrayed him. His mask was slipping. Maybe later, I whispered, lowering myself into the armchair as though gravity itself was too heavy. I made sure my hands trembled when I adjusted the blanket across my lap, my eyes clouded with false confusion. Daniel followed, still clutching the glass like a waiter at the world's worst restaurant. His expression was one of carefully staged concern, but underneath pulsed something sharper. Impatience, greed, the gnawing hunger of a man who had waited too long for a fortune he didn't earn. "I'm worried about you," he said, voice soft. "You're getting worse." Worse. That was the script. He was rehearsing lines for doctors, lawyers, anyone who might later question his intentions. "I think I should see a doctor," I murmured, testing him. His face lit, relief flashing across his features. "Actually, Dr. Singh called. He wants to come back today. Finish your evaluation." "Finish?" I asked, letting the word drift, my brow furrowed with feigned uncertainty. "What do you mean?" "It's important," Vanessa's voice rang out as she entered, dressed immaculately for someone who pretended she had spent the morning caring for me. "He'll make sure you get the help you need." Their eagerness was palpable. They weren't even pretending patience anymore. They wanted signatures, control, the company. And this time I realized with a chill, they wouldn't stop until they had it, or until I was out of their way entirely. When Dr. Singh arrived, he no longer bothered with the pretense of medicine. He barely asked questions, instead laying out papers across the coffee table like cards in a game he was certain he had already won. "Mrs. Carter," he said, tapping the first page, "you're showing signs of decline. These documents, we guarantee you receive proper care." Even through them all now, I saw the words clearly. Power of attorney, conservatorship petition, and worst of all, commitment order. I lifted my head slowly, my voice trembling. "What happens after I sign these?" "You'll be transferred to a facility," Dr. Singh said, his tone rehearsed. "A place where you'll be safe." "How long would I stay there?" "That depends on your progress," he said smoothly. "Possibly permanently." The word hit me like ice water. Permanently. They weren't simply trying to steal the company, they were preparing to erase me. I forced my hands to tremble as I reached for the pen. "Okay," I whispered, "I'll sign them." Relief spread across their faces, triumphant and grotesque. Vanessa's smile sharpened like a blade. Daniel leaned closer, and Dr. Singh poised his pen above the page. But just as my fingers touched the paper, the phone rang. The shrill sound cracked through the silence, startling us all. "That's probably Andrew," I said, my voice breaking with a mix of fear and hope. Their expressions shifted instantly, panic flashing in Daniel's eyes, Vanessa's jaw tightening, Dr. Singh stiffening in his seat. The phone rang again. I let it. I didn't move, didn't reach for it. Simply let the sound echo through the room like a reminder of the truth waiting beyond these walls. When it finally went silent, they exhaled in collective relief, like three conspirators saved from the gallows. But what they didn't know was that hope had already slipped through the cracks. Andrew was out there. Andrew would not stay silent forever. As the Dr. Singh guided my hand toward the first page, I felt the weight of every lie, every betrayal pressing down. My fear was real, yes, but so was my strength. They believed they were inches from victory, but the truth was simple. They had underestimated me, and underestimation is the sharpest weapon I owned. So stay with me, because the stage is set for the confrontation that will shatter everything they thought they controlled. And trust me, you will want to see how their performance ends. The pen hovered over the page, my hand trembling, not only from the act, but from the terrible weight of what these papers meant. Conservatorship, power of attorney, commitment. Each word was a blade aimed straight at my life. Daniel leaned in, his voice soft, coaxing. "It's for the best, Mom. You'll be safe, protected." Safe, protected. His lies filled the room like smoke, suffocating, toxic. I let my lips part as though surrendering. Just as Dr. Singh's hand closed over mine, steadying the pen, the front door burst open. "Don't sign anything!" The voice was sharp, urgent, filled with fury and fear. Andrew stood in the doorway, disheveled from travel, his face flushed, his breath ragged, and behind him, two uniformed police officers. The world seemed to stop. Vanessa froze mid-step, her perfect smile vanishing. Daniel went pale, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Dr. Singh snapped his briefcase shut with a clatter, sweat gleaming on his temples. "Andrew," I whispered, real relief flooding my chest, breaking through the act. He strode inside, eyes scanning the scene, taking in the papers, the pen in my hand, the guilty faces surrounding me. "I got your message," he said, his voice shaking. "The voicemail you left last night. You said they were drugging you. I caught the red eye. I called the police from the airport." I had no memory of that voicemail, only the hazy recollection of dialing while pretending to nap, words spilling through the fog. But apparently I had said enough. The officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, are you Margaret Carter?" "Yes," I said, my voice steadier now than it had been in days. "Your son reported that you were being held against your will, possibly drugged. Is that accurate?" I looked around the room. At Andrew, his eyes wide with fear for me. At Daniel, his face twisted with panic. At Vanessa, clutching her hands together like a desperate actress in the final act of a tragedy. At Dr. Singh, already inching toward the door. "Yes," I said firmly. "For the past week, they've been poisoning my food and drinks to make me appear incompetent. They wanted me to sign over my company." "That's not true," Daniel shouted, his voice cracking. "She's confused. She's been having episodes." The officer raised a hand. "What kind of episodes?" "Memory loss, disorientation, difficulty with simple tasks," Daniel stammered. "It started about a week ago, right around the time I came home early and overheard them plotting." I cut in, my words sharp as glass. "What a coincidence." Vanessa's face flushed crimson. Dr. Singh shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. "Mrs. Carter," the officer asked, "do you have any evidence of these alleged drugging incidents?" "Yes," I said, slipping my hand into the pocket of my robe. I pulled out the small digital recorder I had been carrying for 3 days. "I've been recording conversations since Sunday. Would you like to hear them?" The silence that followed was deafening. The officer nodded. "Play them?" And so I did. The voices filled the living room, Daniel whispering about getting control before Andrew found out, Vanessa insisting I would be manageable within days, Dr. Singh coaching them on symptoms to document, urging them to push for conservatorship. Then came the recording that sealed their fate. Vanessa's voice sharp and worried. "She's getting suspicious. What if she refuses to sign?" Daniel's reply, cold as ice. "Then we go to plan B. Accidents happen to confused elderly people all the time. Maybe she falls down the stairs. Maybe she takes too many pills." The words hung in the air like a noose. The officers exchanged looks, their faces grim, one step behind Daniel, the other behind Vanessa. Within moments, the clink of handcuffs broke the silence. Daniel began to babble, something about misunderstandings, about being concerned for my health, but the sound of metal locking around his wrist drowned him out. Vanessa protested, her voice shrill, insisting it was all for my well-being. No one listened. Dr. Singh made it to the door before the second officer blocked his way. "You'll need to come with us, doctor. We'll be verifying your credentials and your involvement." I sat back against the sofa, the pen still trembling in my fingers, and let out a long, slow breath. For the first time in days, the air felt clean, untainted. The fog in my veins seemed to lift just a little, as if the truth itself had burned through the poison. One of the officers crouched beside me. "Ma'am, we'll need to take you to the hospital for tests, just to confirm what's in your system." I nodded. "Do whatever you need, but make sure they can't hurt anyone else." Andrew moved to my side, his hand finding mine, gripping tightly. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have believed you the first time." "You came when I needed you," I whispered, squeezing his hand back. "That's what matters." As Daniel and Vanessa were let out the door, their faces pale with rage and fear, I felt a fierce surge of triumph. For years I had carried them, excused them, loved them despite their flaws, and this was how they had repaid me. But tonight, for the first time, I wasn't the victim of their betrayal. I was the victor. And the stage was mine again. The courtroom was heavy with silence, the kind that hums with anticipation before the first word is spoken. I stood there, my palms resting on polished wood, my heart steady despite the storm swirling around me. Across the room sat Daniel, the boy I had raised as my own, now hollow-eyed and shackled. Beside him was Vanessa, her once perfect smile gone, her face drawn with bitterness. And at the far end, Dr. Singh wilted in his wrinkled suit, clinging to the last shreds of his reputation. The prosecutor rose. "Mrs. Carter, please tell the court what happened." I drew in a breath and let my eyes sweep over the jury, men and women who leaned forward, waiting. For 27 years, I cared for Daniel Carter. I fed him, clothed him, defended him when the world called him reckless. I loved him like my own blood, and this is how he repaid me. My voice did not tremble. I would not give them that satisfaction. They poisoned me, I continued, my words slicing through the silence. They laced my food and drinks, trying to make me appear confused, incompetent. Their goal was simple: steal the company my late husband and I built with our bare hands. $50 million, built over a lifetime of sacrifice, and they were willing to kill for it. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The prosecutor pressed play on the recorder. My own voice, shaky with feigned confusion, filled the space, followed by theirs. Daniel and Vanessa plotting, Dr. Singh guiding. And then the chilling exchange that had haunted me. "She's getting suspicious. What if she refuses to sign?" Then we go to plan B. Accidents happen to confused elderly people all the time. The words echoed like thunder. Daniel shifted in his seat, his face twisted, his jaw clenched. Vanessa's eyes darted toward him, wide with panic, as though, even now, she wished she could claw the words back from the air. The jury's faces hardened. Their disbelief had melted into outrage. When the recording ended, I lifted my chin and looked directly at Daniel. "You tried to strip me of my mind, my freedom, my dignity. You thought age made me weak. But you were wrong. I am not the victim in this story. I am the survivor who refused to be silenced." The judge's gavel struck, breaking the moment. Verdicts were read aloud, guilty on all counts: fraud, elder abuse, attempted theft, conspiracy. Daniel slumped forward, his hands covering his face. Vanessa let out a sob, sharp and bitter. Duh. Singh bowed his head, knowing his career was gone, his freedom soon to follow. When the sentences were handed down, a strange stillness settled over me. 15 years for Daniel, 12 for Vanessa, 5 for Dr. Singh, and his license revoked permanently. Justice carved into stone. The judge asked if I had anything to say. Slowly I rose. "Your Honor, I gave Daniel every chance to be a good man, every chance to build a life of his own. Instead, he chose betrayal, he chose greed, and he chose cruelty. I feel no pity. I hope this sentence serves as a warning that the elderly are not easy prey, that actions have consequences." The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter." As I stepped down, the air shifted. I could feel it, the weight of what had been done and the strength of what I had reclaimed. My son Andrew was waiting, his hand steady in mine. His eyes were full of pride, of sorrow, of relief. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe without fear. And yet, as the courtroom emptied, I realized something else. This was not just justice. This was closure. The boy I had raised was gone, lost to greed long before the trial. What remained was the woman I had always been, unbroken, unyielding, unwilling to be erased. So if you followed me this far, don't stop now. Because what comes next isn't just about justice. It's about rebuilding, about reclaiming the life they tried to steal. And you'll want to see how I turn betrayal into strength, how I carve a future out of ashes. Stay with me. This story is far from over. The trial ended, but its echoes lingered long after the gavel struck. For days, my name filled the papers and the evening news. People whispered about the woman who had outsmarted her greedy stepson, about the recordings, the courtroom drama, the betrayal turned public spectacle. Yet beyond the headlines, I was simply Margaret Carter, sitting at my kitchen table, relearning what it meant to feel safe in my own home. Andrew came often, sometimes with Emily, sometimes alone. He moved through the house with a quiet gentleness, as though he knew the walls themselves held memories of poison and deceit. One afternoon, he set a stack of business documents on the table, his brow furrowed. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "what happens to the company now?" I studied him, the son who had once doubted me, the man who now stood as my anchor. His hands were steady, his shoulders squared, but his eyes revealed the weight he carried. Carter Construction is yours, I said simply. His head snapped up. Mine? Mom, I don't know the first thing about running a construction company. I'm an architect, not an executive. You'll learn, I replied, my voice firm. You're honest. You're responsible, and you have something Daniel never had, integrity. He stared at me, uncertain. What if I fail? You won't, I said, reaching across the table to cover his hand with mine. Because you know what it means to build something with care. You don't cut corners, you don't lie, and you've never once tried to poison me for profit. A reluctant laugh broke from his lips, and for a moment the heaviness lifted. Emily joined us later that evening, her presence warm, her voice soothing. She moved through the kitchen with the ease of family, preparing tea, setting out plates, as if to remind me that ordinary life could exist again. Andrew worries too much, she said, smiling gently. He doesn't realize he's stronger than he thinks. I looked at them both, my son and his wife, and felt a swell of gratitude. The nightmare had nearly broken me, but in its wreckage I had found clarity. Daniel was gone, consumed by his own greed. Vanessa had followed him into ruin. What remained was Andrew, steadfast and untainted, the true heir not just to the company, but to everything Edward and I had built together. That night, as we sat around the dining room table, laughter threading through our conversation for the first time in weeks, I felt the house shift. The air was lighter, no longer thick with suspicion. The shadows seemed softer. For years, I had carried the burden of loving a stepson who repaid me with betrayal. Now, at last, that burden was gone. Andrew looked at me across the table. Mom, he said quietly, I'm sorry I doubted you when you first called. I should have believed you. You came when I needed you, I reminded him. That's what matters. The rest is behind us. But even as I spoke, I knew the past would never fully leave. It would live in the edges of my memory, in the bitter taste of coffee gone wrong, in the reflection of my own face pretending to forget. Yet I refused to let it define me. I had survived, and survival demanded more than endurance. It demanded that I live. The company would go on under Andrew's hand. The family would heal, with Emily's kindness anchoring us. And I, for the first time in years, felt free. Later, after they left, I sat by the window, the night air cool against my skin. The garden stretched before me, roses blooming where Edward and I had planted them decades earlier. Their fragrance drifted in, sweet and stubborn, a reminder that beauty endures even after storms. I thought of Daniel then, not with sorrow, not with longing, but with a cold finality. He had chosen his path. The boy I had raised was gone, replaced by a man who saw only dollar signs where love should have been. His absence left no wound now, only a scar healed and hardened. The future belonged to Andrew, to Emily, to the grandchildren who would one day play in this house without fear, without shadows. As I closed the window and drew the curtains, a quiet peace settled over me. The war was over. The rebuilding had begun. The weeks after the trial passed in a kind of quiet I hadn't known in years. Not the silence of fear, nor the silence of suspicion, but something gentler, like the exhale after a storm, the calm of waves retreating after they've battered the shore. My home was mine again. My mornings were mine again. And most of all, my mind was wholly, defiantly mine again. I began each day the way Edward and I once had, with the ritual of coffee. This time, the rich aroma was not a mask for poison, but a promise of life returning to normal. I stood at the counter, pouring the dark liquid into a porcelain cup, savoring the steam curling upward. For the first time in months, I sipped without doubt. No bitterness beneath the flavor, no fear in the swallow. Just coffee, just peace. Andrew visited often, bringing files from the company, though his manner carried less of a businessman and more of a son determined to do right by his mother. He would sit across from me in the study, papers spread in neat stacks, asking questions, listening carefully, his pen scratching notes. Each time I looked at him, I saw Edward's steadiness in his shoulders, his integrity in the set of his jaw. One afternoon after we finished reviewing contracts, Andrew closed the folder and said, Mom, I don't think of it as just a company anymore. I think of it as a legacy. Yours, Dad's. something I want to protect, not just run. The words filled me with pride and relief. I had fought for that very legacy when others tried to erase me, and now I could pass it on, knowing it was safe. Emily joined him that evening, carrying a casserole dish still warm from the oven. We ate together at the dining table that once echoed with Vanessa's false laughter, Daniel's impatient whities. Now only genuine warmth filled the room. Emily's smile softened Andrew's edges, and when she reached for my hand after dinner, her touch carried the quiet vow of family renewed. There were nights when shadows still lingered. When I woke from dreams of staircase and pills, of Daniel's voice whispering threats. But each time I would rise, wrap myself in a shawl and walk to the garden. The roses Edward and I planted glowed faintly in the moonlight, their scent reminding me of everything still worth holding on to. The fear never stayed long in that space. It couldn't. Not among roots so deep, blossoms so defiant. I often wondered if Daniel thought of me in his cell, if he replayed the trial in his mind the moment his own words condemned him. Perhaps he hated me for surviving, for winning. Perhaps he convinced himself I had betrayed him, not the other way around. It no longer mattered. His choices were his burden to bear, not mine. What mattered was here, the house alive with laughter again, the company steady in Andrew's hands, my freedom intact. One evening as we sat together in the living room, Andrew said, "You could step away now, Mom, travel, write, live for yourself. You don't have to keep fighting anymore." I smiled at him, feeling the truth of it. Maybe, but life isn't about stopping the fight. It's about choosing the right battles. And I've already won the most important one. The fire crackled softly in the hearth. Emily leaned her head against Andrew's shoulder. The moment was simple, ordinary, but in its simplicity lay everything I had fought for. Love, safety, family, and the freedom to breathe without fear. As the night drew in, I found myself at the window once more, watching the moon rise above the garden. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, not frail, not broke, but strong, scarred, and unshaken. They had tried to erase me. They had tried to steal my name, my legacy, my mind. But I was still here, still standing, and stronger than ever. Because in the end, betrayal did not define me. Survival did. The story you followed is more than betrayal and survival. It's proof that even in the darkest plots, truth finds its way to the surface. Margaret Carter refused to be erased, and in her defiance, she reclaimed her freedom and her legacy. If this journey gripped you, share it with others. Let it remind them that strength has no age, and courage cannot be poisoned. Follow along, like, and subscribe because stories of resilience are meant to be told again and again.